All right. Thanks for joining us. Dave Smith, libertarian, host of Part of the Problem podcast. And of course, he was involved in a mega debate the other day with both Cenk Uygur as his partner, which, by the way, I could talk a lot about just that. I like seeing a libertarian and a lefty sort of work like together on something that was healing for the soul. But you were up against Dennis Prager and Batya Ungar-Sargon. So let me start with is Dennis Prager a prick behind the scenes? Because that's the vibe I got. And I have some sources who shall not be named who were in the vicinity and said, yeah, he's a fucking asshole in real life. Was that your experience, or was he actually a nice guy?
Okay, so I had the same vibe, and I was like, when the debate was over, I was like, oh, this guy's not going to look me in the eye or shake my hand or anything like that. But he wasn't like that. And we all went out to dinner afterward. Everyone except Sagar. He's too good for us, apparently.
Sagar, no, listen. In his defense, Sagar legitimately goes to bed at like 8 p.m. every night.
He's on the Huberman train.
yeah, that is true. That's actually true. That's what that's about.
I have no sympathy for this defense. I have two little kids. I'm always exhausted. There's never a moment. Right now, I could close my eyes and just go to sleep. So no excuse. No, but Dennis didn't stay that long. He came for a little bit, but like he was nice. But I don't know. You know, if you've heard from other people that he's a prick, that might be true. I didn't like get to know the guy well enough. I kind of felt like I mean, maybe it's a little messed up for me to say this, but I just thought the results of the debate were so thoroughly one-sided.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that like I did such a great job. It was more just that. Though. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But it was more like that he just didn't do anything. I felt like I used the example. I was like, if you were like a boxer and you showed up to a big prize fight and then the guy just put his hands down and just
the moment
like didn't throw any punches.
There were a lot of moments that stick with me, but one in particular is when he's like, name an atrocity that Israel has committed. You're like,
we covered that.
What? Like, I could name them that happened literally yesterday, right? We could spend all day here talking about what's been done since October 7th. It was so astonishing to me, and I would love to get your reaction to like what you were thinking in that moment, because it just makes me ask the question, is he so much in the bubble that he actually believes that? Or is he just lying? Is he just, a spin master and a propagandist and thinks he can get one over on us? Because anyone who's actually following what's happening and watching what's happening in the Gaza Strip cannot say that with a straight face.
Yeah, like, right. So whatever side you're on, even if you're like on the pro-Israeli side, it's really, those are the only options. What you said, like either you don't know anything about this or you're just lying. And, like, even if you, like someone like, say, Benny Morris, who somehow twists himself into pretzels to defend this, would never sit there and be like, Dayer Yassin, that was it. That was the only atrocity. Name one other one. Like, no one would say that. That moment actually like messed with me a little bit because there's these weird things when you're in a debate. There's all these kind of like tactics and framing. And so I was making the point about Benjamin Netanyahu propping up Hamas and how that undercuts the Israeli excuse for this war. And then he just mentioned the massacre in the Olympics in Germany. And so then I just mentioned Dayer Yassin is like, okay, we could all mention atrocities, like that has nothing to do with my point. And then he's like, name one more than that. And I was kind of baffled for a moment. Like in that moment, it was good that I had Cenk there with me because he came in and kind of caught my back. But I was just so blown away that like, I was like, well, do I try to get back to the point I was making? Do you actually think I can't name another atrocity? Then like in your head, like all the atrocities are going off. I'm like, wait, should I get into like Lebanon in the 80s and the assassination campaigns? And
I actually thought about that too, because I was like, even Ronald Reagan called that a Holocaust.
Yes,
right?
Right. Like it's nobody who's being honest on any side of this issue would ever pretend you couldn't come up with another one. And then also in my mind, it's like he downplayed Dayer Yassin by saying,
yeah, he said it doesn't count. That's during
it was
war,
during a war. Like it was one time during a war. And then I kind of was like almost in my mind, like, well, no, let's really get into what happened there, because like that's so not an excuse. Like it was in a war. I mean, kind of, they call that period a civil war. This is in early 1948, before any of the other Arab nations had intervened. And yes, there were street clashes. By the way, on the Palestinian side, with a mostly disarmed, from the British having disarmed them after the Arab revolts. from a mostly disarmed group of peasants shooting at them with old rifles on the streets. And so then these militias, the Ergon and the Stern Gang, decide to march into a village and rape all of the women and murder all of the children and murder all of the men. Like, I'm sorry, that's not, no, you weren't like at war with that village. So anyway, I don't know. But to me, the moment in the debate, honestly, was when his opening. Because I kind of went in there with like a thing of, you know, look, I'm a comedian who, I mean, I'm obsessed with this stuff. But I'm a comedian who likes to read books. And Dennis Prager has been doing talk radio since before I was born, or right around since I've been born. And this is like his issue. So I'm going in to debate a guy who on his issue, and he's been on TV and radio since before I was born. And I was like, you know, all right, I better really be on point and do a good job here. And in his opening statement, he opened with his tagline of like, one side wants peace and the other side wants them dead.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was just like, oh, he's got nothing. I mean,
that's right.
He just has every talking point that you've heard a million times before.
But it would be like if I opened and my opening statement was, there are no Arabs who embrace terrorism.
Right.
That's not true. You know, and you'd be like, what? That's ridiculous.
This
you can't
total
say that.
denial of reality.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's interesting because as you're pointing out, it's kind of an effective tactic. Like if you're just thinking because it was like
narrativizing as well.
Yeah, well, it's so then you have to spend time like grappling with reality, you know, in a way that then you can't get to these other points that you want to make. But you know, what was astonishing to me is he opens with who wants peace, and be honest with yourself. You know, if the Palestinians laid down their weapons, there'd be peace. If the Israelis laid down their weapons, then they'd all be murdered. And like, you have to admit that that's the case. And then later on in the debate, he admits like, no, I don't want a two-state solution.
Yeah.
So
they don't want peace. By the way, I don't want peace, but they don't want peace.
They don't want peace. They're the problem. But I also don't accept peace.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point. I also just think these hypotheticals are stupid. I mean, it would be like as if, you know, in 2002, when the war drums were beating to invade Iraq, and someone were to say, well, like, ask me this question, what would be worse? If Saddam Hussein was president of the United States of America, or if George Bush was the president of Iraq?
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, but that's not the situation at all. So like, what are you proving? And by the way, in that example, yes, it would be worse if Saddam Hussein was the president of the United States of America, and it would be better if George W. Bush was the president in Iraq. But like, what does that mean? That's none of that is even plausibly going to be the reality of the situation. And so how about we look at what's actually happening, which is that George W. Bush is lying through his teeth to try to drum up interest in a war. And so like, I don't know, all of that is stupid. It's nothing. It's completely irrelevant.
His reaction to you was to scream at the top of his lungs, you libeled. Oh, so from our perspective, we looked at that as he wanted to say that's blood libel. He wanted to say that, but he reeled it in a little bit and just went with libel. Is that how you interpreted it in the moment? And then the point Crystal and I made in the aftermath, I didn't know this at the time. I had to look it up. I was like, wasn't Dave Smith raised Jewish? And so effectively he's trying to call you, raised Jewish, an anti-Semite in that moment because he was saying name an atrocity. And in your mind, you're like, there's 842 of them. I'm not just going to spit one out, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, they're just kind of reduced to these like slogans and talking points and accusations. And I just think anyone with a mind can see that that's not like, you can't win a debate by just screaming libel at someone. And of course, you know, like, I'm Jewish. And there's Rabbi Barclay called me on a Candace Owens show. He called me a self-hating Jew. You know, that's just like kind of the thing that you get called. It's so like, what does that even mean? Do you think I hate myself? Like, I'm so clearly awesome. Why would I hate myself? And like I hate my grandma or something like that because I think what Israel's doing to the Palestinians is wrong. But honestly, like the war propagandists always rely on stuff that's this stupid. Again, it was the you're either with the troops or you're with the terrorists, right? This was always the line of the George W. Bush administration.
They hate us because we're free.
Right. It just always just the dumbest things that anyone with a mind should be able to see through.
Do you think he was trying to say blood libel, though? Do you think that there was an implication there of like anti-Semite, or do you think that it was more neutral than that and he was just trying to say you're lying, not you're lying and you hate Jews?
Well, I mean, it is the same word that they always use in that term, so maybe.
Right.
I mean, I can't read his
And
mind.
no one uses it in any other context.
Yeah,
Right.
I've never heard
Like,
that.
is that even proper English to say you libeled?
No,
Yeah,
it'd
it
be like
does
you
sa-
committed libel, something
It
like that.
sounds
Right?
clunky for sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's also, you know, he was really emotional in the
Yeah.
debate. Like I could see his eyes
Yeah.
were like welding up and stuff. And so I think it's there's got to be something, you know, I don't know exactly, but there's got to be something to having this issue that is your main issue for your entire life, that defines who you are. And then you have nothing, you have no arguments to back it up, and you're getting very emotional about it. And really the tactic that they have is like, you're a bad person in one
Yeah.
way or another, to say that like you're a bad person. And you know, I don't know. I know who I am as a person, and I also know what's going on, and I know what the history of this is, and it's just like, nope, sorry. This doesn't make me a bad person. I got lots of qualities that I could work on that aren't so great, but this here doesn't make me a bad person. Like, so
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's actually a good transition to some of what we see going on right now, because in a sense, like what happens to you or me or Kyle on a micro level, where it's like when people feel they've lost the debate, it's like, you're actually just an anti-Semite. That's why you have these opinions. That's all there is to it. I mean, that's what you see with the, you know, the now authoritarian crackdown that's happening in New York, in LA, in Texas against these campus protesters.